What is a synod? So let's talk about that for just a second. A synod really is just a meeting or an assembly of leaders. And so it's a fancy word, and I know Deacon Matt's already alluded to the Greek behind that, of where people are gathering together. But there's more behind it. So let's take a look at what's sort of behind this idea of synod. There has to be a context, right? And so it's where people are walking together, and we see this in the New Testament. We see where disciples are walked on the way. They walked with Jesus, that they were following Jesus on the way, and they were even called followers of the way. And so we see many stories about Jesus and his disciples moving together. And that lays a bit of groundwork. And then we read about the road to Emmaus, where two were walking and they were devastated that it appeared that Jesus had been crucified and died. And then a stranger joins them and is walking with them and listening and dialoguing with them about their fears, their anxieties, their perceptions, and what has happened. And it's not until they shared a meal together, and that they recognized that it was Jesus in their presence. And Jesus is walking literally with these two folks on the road to Emmaus. So we see that in Scripture. We may be very familiar with that Scripture. It's somewhat foundational to what we do in catechesis. And so we're accompanied on the way by Christ. And so if you can sort of put that into that larger perspective, that we are a people, we're moving, and Christ is in our presence. And there's actually origins also in Acts 15, where now we have this new church and we have preaching to the Gentiles. And so there's a bit of controversy around whether they should adhere to the Jewish law or whether that is still pertinent to them to becoming followers of Jesus. And so the leadership gathers together in Jerusalem, and it's where Peter sort of establishes his position as leader of the church. He listens, they all dialogue, and then he makes a statement. And so now we're beginning to see the structure of synodality or of a synod a little clearer, where we can understand that there's a bit of formality behind this movement and Jesus walking with us. So synods are they're similar to councils. So anticipating that question, I had it. What is the difference between a synod and a council? And we don't have time to get into all of that tonight, and I'm not sure I would be the best person to answer that question, only to say that the synods are similar to councils. There was an ecumenical council. It convened in Nicaea in 325. So we're beginning to see, as the church formalizes and develops, that these formal gatherings are coming together to sort of solve issues. Now we're beginning to recognize that there are questions that need to be addressed. And so there's a power of the risen Lord that's guiding these gatherings, councils, and synods, and leading the people of God forward in their faith as the truth is revealed. So ecumenical councils were held through the first millennium and continued in the second millennium. The Council of Constance, is that how you say that, Deacon Matt? Resolved the Western Schism of the 15th century. The Council of Trent was convoked in response to the Protestant Reformation. So all of these sort of challenges and uncertainties would bubble up or surface up, and so a council would be convened. And so in the 20th century now, we began to see that, let's see if I can get that slide together, the formalization and the popularity of synods began to grow. And so we see the Second Vatican Council, where there was an experience of bishops who had a greater role in the governance of the church and really looked for this to continue. Because what that means is that the voices are being represented, that voices are being heard. And So Paul VI, Pope at the time, issued a document creating the Council of Bishops, and then Pope Francis, and I'm skipping a lot here for all of you who are much more familiar with this than I, Pope Francis took the office and appointed 9 cardinals to sort of solidify that synodal presence, and in hopes that the cardinals would then be electing, they would be elected by the Synod of Bishops. Now, I just heard a sound, so we might get bumped off. If we do, we'll be right back in about 2 minutes. I'm unfortunately getting familiar with that sound. Now, the laity was becoming more active and recognized as an authority in the faith life of the church. And so their voice should be included, right, as a voice of the faithful that can contribute to lived faith experience. So all of these things are sort of coming together to formalize synods. And Pope, so let me show you here, we've got Pope Paul VI from Second Vatican Council. We've got Pope Francis taking over now and trying to really move this forward. And Pope Francis has been doing a lot of movement and trying to formalize and help this synodal process develop. I think it's important to just sort of touch on the process because it's not a sort of one-time event. It's not a one-time meeting. This is sort of a process, and we can relate to this in our own lives. When we're thinking about something that's very important, and the thought process that goes behind it, the research, the conversation. Maybe you have a family, or you're part of a family. And, the mom or dad could say, this is the way it's going to be, and that's it. Or we could all sit down together and we could hear the voices from each family member from their own context and sort of shape our decision together. So that would not typically happen over, half an hour. There might be some experiences that happened and some processing and some listening and reflection, prayer, and then we move forward with the decision in our family. So that's sort of like the synodal process. It's got phases that take place over time. So generally speaking, for this particular upcoming synod, the diocesan phase will be coming up later this fall. And then we move into the continental phase and then the universal phase. So it's a down-up approach. If you look at these and you recognize that this begins in our local area, our local region, if you will, where dioceses are listening to their parishes and their the faithful from those parishes. And we're gathering information, and a document is going to be sort of worked and reworked and moved along throughout the process. Then we take all of that information and move to the continental phase, and then that listening takes place, and they're discerning what they're hearing and updating the document, which it moves to the universal church phase. And so that won't take place until October of 2023. So we've got we've got 3 phases and a lot of work that goes before those and after those to sort of conclude the synodal process.